The rain had been falling since early morning, the kind of quiet rain that did not shout but whispered its presence through every cracked window and tired roof in the city. Streets reflected the gray sky like mirrors of broken dreams, and buses splashed puddles along sidewalks crowded with people trying to escape their worries for one more day. On the third floor of a narrow building, Ayaan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at an envelope he had opened too many times. The rent notice lay inside like a verdict already delivered. He did not need to read it again. He knew every number, every warning, every polite sentence that somehow managed to sound colder each time. Ayaan had come to this city with hope folded carefully into his suitcase. He was not running from anything dramatic. He was simply running toward a future that felt impossible in the town where he grew up. His mother had raised him alone after his father passed away, teaching him dignity before anything else. When she sold her wedding bangles, so he could afford his first semester of college, he promised her he would make every sacrifice worth it. But promises are heavy things when money runs out. He worked nights at a call center, answered endless questions with a tired smile in his voice, and studied during the day until words blurred on the page. Even then, it was never enough. Fees increased, shifts were cut, and the landlord at the call center building announced layoffs with a shrug. Now he was 3 days past due on rent. The building he lived in was old, with chipped paint and a staircase that groaned like it remembered better days. But to Ayaan it was shelter. It was the place where he boiled tea in the mornings, whispered prayers before exams, and stared at the ceiling imagining a future that felt further away every time he checked his wallet. Downstairs, Mrs. Eleanor Collins stood behind her small reception desk, reading through the same rent ledger she had kept for 20 years. Her hair, once deep brown, had faded into silver, and the lines on her face were not harsh but thoughtful, like she had spent her life listening more than speaking. She had inherited the building from her late husband, a man who believed that property was a blessing only when it became a service. She could have sold it long ago. Developers had offered her more money than she ever dreamed of, but she had refused every time. "These rooms hold stories," her husband once said. "You don't sell stories." So she stayed. She repaired broken pipes, painted hallways with her own hands, and learned every tenant's name. She knew which door hid a new baby, which held a struggling artist, and which concealed a young man who walked quietly like he didn't want to disturb the world. Ayaan. He had always paid on time until this month. Eleanor noticed the missing amount in her ledger the first week. She waited. By the second, she wrote a reminder but never slipped it under his door. By the third, she sighed and closed the book. That afternoon, she decided to knock. Ayaan heard the sound like thunder. He knew exactly who it was before the knock had even finished echoing in the hallway. He stared at the door, then at the envelope on his bed, then back at the door. Another knock, softer this time. He opened it. Mrs. Collins stood there holding a small notepad, her expression calm, not accusing. Her eyes traveled briefly past him, noticing the bare room, the single chair, the books stacked on the floor like silent companions. "Good afternoon, Ayaan," she said gently. "May I come in?" He nodded and stepped aside. The room smelled faintly of tea leaves and damp clothes that had dried without enough sunlight. Eleanor sat on the edge of the chair, careful not to invade more space than necessary. "I won't take much of your time," she said. "I only wanted to check in." Ayaan swallowed. "I know why you're here." She smiled slightly. "I thought I did, but now I think I don't." He looked down at his hands, at the way his fingers twisted together as if trying to hold something invisible. "I lost some hours at work. They're changing schedules. I'm trying to fix it. I just need a little more time." Eleanor closed her notepad without writing anything. "How much time?" He hesitated. "A week. Maybe 2. Her gaze softened, not because he was late, but because of the way he said it, like someone asking the universe for mercy. She stood. "Come downstairs tomorrow evening," she said. "We'll talk." That night, Ayaan barely slept. His mind replayed every possible outcome. Eviction, packing his things, calling his mother with a voice too steady to reveal how broken he felt. The next evening, he walked down the stairs slowly, like each step carried a question he did not want answered. Eleanor was waiting in the small reception area with 2 cups of tea already prepared. "Sit," she said. They drank in silence for a moment. Then she asked him about his studies, about his family, About how he ended up here. No one had asked him those things in months. He told her everything. About his mother's sacrifices. About the job that had promised stability and delivered uncertainty. About the fear that followed him even into sleep. When he finished, his voice was quiet, not from shame but from exhaustion. Eleanor listened as though nothing else in the world mattered. Finally, she said, "When I was your age, I had nothing but a suitcase and a husband who was braver than he was wise. We slept in a room smaller than this one. Some days, we didn't know how we would manage the next." Ayaan looked up, surprised. She continued, "People think kindness is a luxury. But kindness is how you survive." He did not know what to say. She slid a paper across the desk. It was not an eviction notice. It was a revised agreement. "You will not pay rent this month," she said. "Next month, we start again." Slowly, he stared at the paper, unable to breathe for a second. "I can't accept this." "You can," she replied calmly. "And you will. Because someday, when you can, you will pass this forward to someone else. That is the only payment I require." Something inside him broke open, not in sadness but in relief. The kind that arrives after holding your breath too long. From that evening, everything changed. Ayaan began helping Eleanor with small repairs. He fixed light switches, carried groceries, cleaned the courtyard on weekends. It was never asked of him, but he needed to give something back. Their conversations grew longer. They talked about books, about music that reminded Eleanor of her youth, about cities Ayaan dreamed of visiting once he had something solid beneath his feet. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, Eleanor slipped on the staircase and twisted her ankle. It was Ayaan who heard her call and rushed to her side, supporting her weight with a strength he didn't know he had. He stayed with her at the clinic, filling out forms, calling her neighbor, waiting until she was settled back in her apartment. "Seems like we're helping each other now," she joked. He smiled. "Seems like it." But something else was growing in the quiet moments between them, not romance in the loud sense, but a deep, patient bond that felt like home finding home. One evening, Eleanor invited him to dinner in her apartment. It was the first time he had been there. The walls were covered with photographs. Her and her husband in younger days, the building when it was new, tenants who had long moved away but left behind pieces of their lives. They ate simple food, but it tasted like celebration. "Ayaan," she said suddenly, setting her fork down, "have you ever thought about what comes after college?" "All the time," he answered. "But thinking and knowing are different things." She nodded. "My husband and I always dreamed of turning this building into a community space. Classes, workshops, small libraries. We never had the strength to start." He leaned forward. "You still can." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Not alone." The idea settled between them like a spark that refused to die. They began planning. Ayaan used his studies to draft proposals. Eleanor spoke to old contacts. Slowly, the building changed, not in bricks, but in spirit. A small reading room opened on the ground floor. A free tutoring corner appeared near the courtyard. Neighbors who had never spoken began, sharing stories. And in the center of it all were two people who once thought they were alone. On the anniversary of the day Ayaan had missed his rent, Eleanor handed him an envelope. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a certificate naming him co-manager of the building project. "I can't," he said. "You already have," she replied. "You didn't just pay rent, Ayaan. You paid with loyalty, with care, with time." His eyes filled, but this time it was not from fear. It was from gratitude, so large it had nowhere else to go. The rain came again that evening, soft and steady, just like it had a year before. But now, the windows glowed with light, and the halls echoed with laughter. Ayaan stood on the staircase, listening to voices rise from the reading room below. Eleanor joined him, leaning lightly on the railing. "Do you hear that?" she asked. He smiled. "It sounds like a beginning." She looked at him with pride, not ownership but recognition. "No," she said softly. "It sounds like love learning how to live." And for the first time in a long while, the city did not feel so heavy. It felt like a place where broken starts could become beautiful endings, where a boy without money could find more than shelter, and where a landlady could give not charity, but a future. In the quiet between heartbeats, they both understood something simple and powerful. Sometimes, The greatest love stories are not written in grand gestures, but in moments of grace when someone chooses to stay.